The morning light came slow and gray over the San Pedro Valley, the kind that carried no warmth. Smoke drifted across the low hills, thin as a dying man's breath. Luke Tanners rode through it, his horse stepping careful between blackened wagon boards and the bodies of men gone cold. He wasn't looking for trouble. He never did. But trouble had a way of finding men who lived too close to Apache country. He was 34, a quiet man with narrow shoulders and hands shaped by plow handles and fence wire. The war had ended 5 years ago, but the West had its own wars still. Land wars, blood wars, wars that didn't make it into newspapers back east. He'd come searching for a stray mule, gone off during the night. What he found instead stopped him cold. A woman stood at the far edge of the ruin, barefoot in the soot, her skin bronze, her hair wild as horse mane. Blood streaked her arm. In her hand, a knife caught the light like a shard of ice. She couldn't have been more than 25, though her eyes looked older, old the way mountains are old. Luke's hand went to the rifle on his saddle. She saw it, didn't move, just stared at him across the wreckage, the knife steady in her grip. "Don't," he said quietly. She didn't understand a word, or didn't care. She took one step closer to the body at her feet. A young Apache man, maybe her kin. Luke dismounted slowly, keeping the rifle pointed down. "I ain't here to harm you." Still nothing. The only sound was a wind pushing through the charred remains of canvas. Then, faintly, she spoke, words he didn't know, whispered like a prayer. He realized she was saying goodbye. He watched her lower to her knees beside the dead man and press her forehead to his chest. Luke looked away, jaw tight. It wasn't his business. He should have turned the horse and gone. But he didn't. When she staggered to her feet again, her knees gave out. The knife slipped from her hand. She fell, face first, into the dust. He cursed under his breath, stepped forward, and lifted her up. She was light, too light, and burning with fever. By the time he got her on his horse, the wind had carried the last of the smoke away. The world looked clean again, but it wasn't. His cabin sat on a slope north of the river, a mile from any other soul. Built by his own hands, 2 rooms, a stone hearth, and a barn that creaked like an old man in his sleep. He laid her on his bed, fetched water, cleaned the wounds on her arm. Bullet graze, not deep. She didn't wake till dusk. When she did, she bolted upright, wild-eyed. "Easy," Luke said. "You're safe here." Her gaze darted to the door, to the rifle hanging by the wall. He stepped back, palms open. "Ain't gonna hurt you." Her English was rough, the words broken like her breath. "Where, brother?" Luke hesitated. He didn't make it. She turned away, face empty of tears, the way soldiers did after battle. He knew that look. That night she wouldn't eat. She sat by the fire, arms wrapped tight, staring into the flames. The storm outside rattled the roof. Luke worked quietly, feeding the horse, bringing in kindling. Every time he looked her way, she hadn't moved. After hours, he finally said, "Name's Luke Tanners." No answer. "You got a name?" A long pause, and "Nalin." He nodded once. "You rest, Nalin. Tomorrow I'll take you to fort. They'll—" Her head snapped toward him. "No fort." The fear in her voice cut through the room. He raised his hands. All right. No fort." She looked at him for the first time then. Truly looked, as if weighing something behind his eyes. Days passed. The fever broke. She began to move about, slow, deliberate, silent as a shadow. She patched the sleeve of his coat, gathered herbs from the hillside, cooked over the fire without asking. Luke didn't know what to make of her. She spoke little, but he could feel her watching him as he worked the fields, always from a distance, always alert. The men in town called Apache women wild, godless, but she moved with a grace that came from knowing how fragile life was. He'd lost his wife and child to fever years ago. He'd buried them on the hill behind the barn. Since then, the farm had been quiet. He'd kept his hands busy so his heart wouldn't remember. Now, there was a stranger in his home, and the silence was gone. That evening, as he mended a fence by lantern light, she stood nearby, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Men come," she said softly. He looked up. Dust trails in the distance. 3 riders heading straight for the house. They arrived near sundown, guns slung low, laughter sharp as spurs. "Evening, Tanner," one called out. "Heard there's an Apache loose around here. You seen any tracks?" Luke wiped his hands on his trousers. "Ain't seen nobody but myself." The men dismounted. One kicked at the dirt near his boots. "Funny thing, we found a dead trooper not far from here. Looked like a squad did it." "I don't know about that," Luke said. His heart thudded in his throat. "Mind if we look around?" He shrugged, pretending calm. "Ain't nothing worth seeing." While they searched, Nowlin crouched in the dark root cellar, hand clamped over her mouth. She could hear their boots above, hear one of them spit and laugh. When they left, the sun was gone. Luke barred the door behind them and leaned his head against it, shaking. She climbed up from the cellar, eyes wide. "They kill you," she said flatly. He looked at her, something fierce flickering under his calm. "Not today." That night, neither of them slept. He sat by the fire, staring into flames. She moved quietly, wrapping her shawl tighter. Then, without warning, she spoke. "You alone," she said. "No wife, no children." He froze. "That's right." She studied him, her gaze steady as stone. "My people gone. My blood ends soon." He frowned. "What you sayin'?" She took a step closer, voice low. "Sure, I want a son from you." The words hung between them like gun smoke. Luke blinked, unsure he'd heard right. "What?" Her chin lifted. "A son, to carry life. You help me." He stood, anger flaring more from confusion than anything. That's not how it works. You don't just..." She cut him off. "You good man. Kind. You saved me. I choose you." He backed away, shaking his head. "I ain't doing this. You don't even know me." "I know enough." Her tone carried no shame, no pleading, just certainty. "You keep me safe. I keep you safe. 2 souls. 1 life." He stared at her, heart pounding. She didn't move closer, didn't smile, just looked at him like a challenge. "I ain't that man," he said finally. "Find someone else." She tilted her head. "There's no one else." The fire crackled between them. Outside, the wind picked up, whispering through the gaps in the walls. Luke turned away, his jaw tight. "You should rest." She nodded once, slow. "I will wait." That night, long after she'd lain down, Luke sat awake listening to the wind. He thought of the dead Apache boy, of her eyes filled with fire and sorrow, of his own loneliness he never spoke of. He'd built walls around his heart, same as he'd built fences around his land. And now, a stranger had stepped right through both. When morning came, he went to fetch water from the creek. The air was cool, the earth soft under his boots. Halfway down the path, he saw hoof prints, fresh ones. He dropped the bucket and ran back to the house. Nowlin stood in the doorway, rifle in hand. "They come again," she said. Luke took the rifle from her, loaded it, and stepped outside. "You hide." She didn't move. "I hide. They kill you." He looked back at her. For the first time, there was no fear in her face, only defiance. He managed a grim smile. "Then let's hope they don't." The riders never came that day, but they would, sooner or later. As dusk fell, he found her sitting by the barn, looking up at the moon. "Why me?" he asked quietly. She didn't look away. "Because you listen." He didn't understand what that meant. Not yet. When the wind shifted, he smelled rain, the kind that came slow, steady, washing dust off the world. She rose and went inside. He followed, closing the door behind them. For the first time, the cabin didn't feel empty. And for the first time in years, Luke Tanners felt a faint, dangerous stir of something he thought was long dead. Hope. Spring came late to the valley, cold rain softening the dirt around the charred fence posts. Luke rebuilt what he could. The land was all he knew, and he clung to it the way a man clings to purpose. Nowlin stayed. She didn't ask to leave, didn't thank him for shelter. She simply worked, silent, steady, as if the earth owed her no forgiveness, but she meant to earn it anyway. Each morning, Luke saw her moving through the fields, her shawl wrapped tight against the wind, her hair loosed down her back. She handled the hoe like it was part of her arm. Sometimes she sang under her breath, soft, strange sound that rose and fell like prayer. He didn't ask what they meant. He didn't have to. They were the same kind of songs a man hums when he's afraid to speak to ghosts. At night, they shared the same fire. He'd talk sometimes about planting seasons, the stubborn mule, the way the river froze hard one winter. She listened. When she spoke, her words came slow, careful. "My people always move," she said once. "We follow the deer, the rain. You stay." "I built this place," he replied. "Ain't got nowhere else to go." She looked at him a long while, then said, "You build walls so you not feel." He didn't answer. By mid-May, the hills grew gold and quiet. But quiet never lasted long in Apache country. Luke noticed tracks along the north ridge, horsemen, not Apaches, boots, spurs. He said nothing to her, only worked faster, kept his rifle closer. Then, one evening, he found a rabbit gutted by the door, a warning. Ranchers sometimes left signs like that, a promise that trouble was coming. When he told Nalin, she didn't flinch. "They come," she said. "You go." "This is my land," Luke replied. She shook her head. "Land can burn. Life cannot return." He looked at her, really looked. Her face was calm, unreadable, but her eyes were not. They were full of something he hadn't seen before. Fear for him. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of smoke from far away. He said, "If they come, we'll face it together." She didn't argue. She only said, "Then we run together." The attack came at dawn 2 days later. Luke was feeding the mare when he heard the first shot crack through the stillness. The horse screamed and bolted. He turned and saw riders cresting the hill. 5, maybe 6, armed and eager. Dust rose behind them like a storm. "Now, Lynn!" he shouted, sprinting for the cabin. She was already outside, bow in hand. "They find us. Get inside." But she didn't. She loosed an arrow that struck one rider in the shoulder, sending him tumbling from his saddle. Then she ran for the barn. Luke grabbed his rifle and fired once, hitting another man's horse. The animal went down hard, throwing its rider into the dirt. The others fanned out, shouting. Luke fired again, ducked behind the water trough as bullets tore through the fence rails. Splinters rained down. He caught sight of Nalin in the shadows of the barn, motioning him to run. He hesitated only a second before sprinting toward her. Shots followed him, sharp, snapping sound that sliced through air and memory. By the time he reached her, his shoulder was grazed, his breath gone. "They burned the house," she said, voice low. He looked back. Smoke was already climbing from the cabin roof. Flames licked the porch. Everything he'd built, gone in minutes. "Go," she said again. "Now." They fled through the back pasture, cutting toward the hills. Horses thundered behind them. The river lay ahead, a dark ribbon twisting through the valley. Luke stumbled, grabbed her hand. "This way." Bullets hissed through the grass. The roar of hooves grew closer. They plunged into the river, the current colder than stone. Water surged around them, pulling at their clothes, dragging them downstream. Luke's hat vanished. His rifle slipped from his grip. He tried to grab Nalin, but the current tore them apart. He hit a rock, went under, came up choking. Then, her hand. She caught his wrist, hauled him toward the far bank. They crawled onto the mud, coughing, soaked alive. For a long while, neither spoke. The world was only breath and rain. When she finally turned to him, her eyes glimmered in the pale morning light. "You saved me once. Now I save you." He laughed, raw and broken. "Guess we're even." She shook her head. "No, not yet." They moved into the forest, hiding beneath the scent of pine and wet earth. His shoulder burned. She tore strips from her dress, bound the wound. Her fingers were steady, her expression fierce. "You should have run," he said. "You would not." He smiled faintly. You know me too well. Not enough, she replied, but more each day. By dusk, they found shelter in a shallow cave above the river. Luke collapsed near the fire she built, exhaustion pressing him down. She sat close, eyes scanning the shadows. He watched her, the way her face softened in firelight, the way her hands never rested. You ever think of going back to your people? They gone, she said simply. Soldiers took the rest. I am last of my blood. He didn't speak after that. There was nothing to say. Outside, thunder rolled over the hills. Rain began to fall again, soft and slow. Inside the cave, the fire flickered. For the first time, Luke realized the strange calm he felt. He should have been afraid, grieving. Instead, he felt alive. They stayed hidden for days, moving only when the smoke from the burned homestead faded. The soldiers and ranchers had gone back north, leaving ash and ruin behind. Luke's wound festered. Nalin searched the forest for herbs, ground them into a paste, pressed it against his skin. The pain was sharp enough to make him curse, but her touch was gentle, her voice steady as she whispered words in her tongue. Medicine, she said. You live. He managed to laugh through clenched teeth. That the doctor's word for it. She smiled faintly. It was the first time he'd seen her do that. It changed her face entirely. By the 5th day, he could stand again. Together they hunted rabbits, set traps, mended their few possessions. At night, when the rain cleared, they lay near the fire and spoke in quiet tones. He told her about Missouri, how his father drank himself to death after the war, how Luke came west to find peace and found emptiness instead. She listened, her gaze on the flames. You run from ghosts, she said. He nodded. Maybe. Guess they run faster. She was quiet for a while. Then, my people say ghosts walk beside us until we make peace with them. You not make peace. He looked at her. And you? I walk with mine, she said simply. Days turned to weeks. They moved deeper into the wild, following deer trails, keeping low. The land grew harsher, more beautiful. Red cliffs, thorn brush, skies stretching endless. One evening, they reached the canyon rim. Below, the river shimmered under the moon. He turned to her. If we cross into Mexico, we could find safety. Start again. She shook her head. Safety not for me. Only child. Only blood that lives. He understood then what her words months ago had meant. Not desire, but legacy. Not want, but survival. They built a small fire on the ridge. The night air was cool, the stars so clear hurt to look at them. You ever think about what comes next? He asked quietly. She looked at him, eyes soft but unyielding. Yes, you. He didn't breathe for a moment. The fire cracked. The wind moved her hair across her face. He reached out, brushed it away without thinking. She didn't pull back. For a heartbeat, they were still. Two souls balanced on the edge of something neither had asked for, but both had found. He leaned forward, kissed her once. Slow, unsure, like testing the weight of a promise. She didn't move at first, then returned it with a gentleness that startled him. When they parted, she whispered, Now we both carry life. Before he could answer, distant hoofbeats echoed up the canyon. They froze. Luke's hand went to his revolver. They're back. She stood, grabbed the rifle. We fight. He nodded, though his heart pounded like a drum. The first shots shattered the silence. Sparks flew as bullets struck stone. Luke fired back, ducking behind a boulder. Nalin knelt beside him, eyes fierce, loading fast. A man's shout rang out, then another. They were closing in. Luke took a shot, hit one. Another bullet tore through his sleeve. He felt blood but kept firing. Nalin's arrow whistled past his ear, struck a rider through the throat. The man fell hard, rolling down the slope. Then came the last charge, 3 riders rushing straight at them. Go! Luke shouted, Get back! She didn't move. She fired again. The lead rider fell, horse crashing into the others. Gunfire exploded all around. Luke turned, saw a flash, felt the bullet tear into his side. He stumbled, gasped. Nalin caught him before he fell. No! She hissed, voice breaking. No die here. He tried to speak, but couldn't. She dragged him deeper into the rocks, her small frame trembling under his weight. When they stopped, she pressed her hands to his wound. "Breathe," she whispered. You stay with me." He forced a smile, blood on his lips. "Told you I'm stubborn." She laughed once, a sound caught between grief and courage. Then stubborn live. The gunfire faded as the remaining riders fled. The echo of their hooves dissolved into the distance. Luke lay back, pale, shaking. The stars spun above him. Nalin leaned over him, her face streaked with dirt and tears. He lifted a trembling hand to her cheek. "Guess we're even again." She pressed his hand against her skin, eyes fierce. "No, now you owe me life." He smiled faintly. "I'll pay it somehow." Then darkness took him. Months passed. The frontier softened under the coming spring. Grass grew again on the plains, and the wind carried something gentler, the scent of renewal. Samuel's cabin stood alone, rebuilt after the fire. Its rough-hewn logs bore the marks of both man and woman, hammer blows beside carved symbols of Naha's tribe. Inside, Naha sat by the hearth, her belly round beneath a wool blanket. Her hands rested there as if guarding something sacred. Samuel worked at the table, carving a cradle from pine. His hair had gone grayer. His eyes, too, had changed, steadier now, hardened by fire but softened by what he'd found after. When the first cry came that night, the wind outside seemed to pause. A boy, small, strong lungs, dark eyes. Naha held him close, whispering words in her tongue, a song Samuel couldn't understand but felt deep in his bones. He stood there, stunned, watching life itself breathe in her arms. "What will we call him?" he asked softly. She looked up. Talon, for he must be sharp, strong, between two worlds. Samuel nodded. He reached out and touched the boy's tiny hand. "Talon," he whispered, as if binding the word to the stars. But peace in the West never lasted long. Weeks later, the first signs came. Hoof prints near the stream, bullet shells in the dirt. A band of ranchers were hunting for the Indian woman who murdered 2 men. Samuel knew what that meant. That night, he packed the horses. Naha refused to flee. "We can't run forever," she said. "Our son must see where he came from." Samuel clenched his fists. "They'll kill us all." "Then we stand," she said. The next morning, they heard the riders. 6 men, guns drawn. Samuel stood in front of the cabin, shotgun ready. Naha was behind him, bow in hand, her son wrapped against her chest. The leader called out, "We know who you are, farmer. Step aside. The squad dies today." Samuel didn't move. "You'll ride over my grave first." The man laughed. "Then that's how it'll be." The gunfire was deafening. Samuel fired, dropped one. Naha's arrow took another through the neck. But there were too many. A bullet grazed Samuel's arm. Another shattered the doorframe. Then a scream, not from fear, from fury. Naha charged. She fired 2 arrows in one motion, both striking true. A third bullet caught her shoulder. She stumbled but stayed standing. Samuel grabbed her, dragging her inside. "Stay down." "I told you," she gasped, blood soaking her blanket. "Our son must live." The last 2 riders dismounted, kicking open the door. Samuel swung the shotgun, 1 shot left. He fired. 1 man fell. The other raised his revolver. Then silence. A single arrow flew through the smoke and struck the final attacker in the heart. Naha was still standing, trembling, blood everywhere, but alive. She dropped the bow, fell to her knees. Samuel caught her before she hit the ground. "Stay with me," he pleaded. Her eyes met his, half-lidded, peaceful. "He will grow strong," she whispered. "Like you, like me." He held her hand as the light left her eyes. The wind outside howled, bending the grass low. Inside the cabin, Samuel sat beside her body, their son sleeping against his chest. The fire crackled, and the world turned quiet again. Years later, folks who passed by the high plain spoke of a quiet man raising a half-Apache boy who rode like lightning and shot straighter than any soldier. They said the man never remarried. They said, When asked about the boy's mother, he'd look west, to the ridges where smoke once rose, and smile faintly. And if you stood close enough, you could hear him whisper, "Born from fire, not fear." So, what do we take from this tale? Maybe this: the frontier wasn't just a land claim. It was a test of heart, of who we became when love asked more of us than we thought we had. If this story moved you, don't forget to share, and leave your thoughts below.